The room smelled like expensive flowers and cheaper decisions. I stood near the back wall of the banquet hall, holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched, watching 200 people celebrate my stepson's graduation from medical school. The chandeliers were the ones I had specifically requested when I called the venue 3 months ago. The catering was from the restaurant my stepson had mentioned once, casually, 2 years back. I had written it down. The string quartet in the corner was playing something classical and gentle, and I had approved their playlist myself. Nobody in that room knew any of that. That wasn't the plan. That was just how things had gone for the past 11 years. My name is Gerald. I turned 63 in February. I retired early from civil engineering after selling a small firm I had built over 22 years. I am not a flashy man. I drive a sensible truck. I wear the same style of flannel shirt in different colors. I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. And I have spent the better part of a decade meaning things that nobody seemed to hear. I married my wife, Diane, when her son Marcus was 14 years old and her daughter Priya was 9. Diane was sharp and funny, and she had a way of laughing that made you feel like you had said the smartest thing in the room. I fell for that laugh before I understood the full weight of what came attached to it. Marcus never called me Dad. That was fine. I never asked him to. What I asked for, quietly, and the way I asked for most things, was basic acknowledgement, eye contact, a thank you when one was warranted. The ordinary small courtesies that people extend to strangers on the street without even thinking about it. He never quite managed those either. Priya was different for a long time. She was warmer, more curious. When she was 12, she used to sit on the porch and ask me questions about bridges and load calculations, and I would answer them seriously because she deserved a serious answer. Those conversations are some of the best memories I have from those years. Then she grew up and she started listening to her brother more than she listened to me. Marcus became a doctor. That sentence still sounds strange to me, not because I doubted him. He was always intelligent, but because I watched every step of that journey from a very specific vantage point. I watched it from the position of the man who made the phone calls, signed the checks, and then sat quietly in whatever corner was available. His undergraduate tuition at the University of Michigan came mostly from his academic scholarship, partly from Diane's savings, and when the gap appeared, as gaps always do, from me. I never announced this. I wrote the check and I handed it to Diane, and I went back to whatever I was doing. His MCAT prep course, the one he took twice, was mine. His application fees to 14 medical schools were mine. When he got into his program and needed to relocate to Philadelphia, the security deposit, the first month's rent, the furniture for an apartment he picked out without asking my opinion, mine. I am not listing these things to complain. I am listing them because what happened at that graduation dinner requires a foundation, and that foundation is made of facts. Diane knew. She always knew. But there is a particular kind of knowing that people do where the information enters their mind and then gets very carefully stored somewhere they do not have to look at directly. Diane was gifted at that kind of knowing. Marcus knew some of it, not all. He knew that money appeared when money was needed. He had chosen, over the years, not to examine that too closely. I understood this. I did not respect it, but I understood it. The dinner was Diane's idea. A celebration, she said. 200 guests, a proper venue, a formal sit-down. She had a vision, and she shared it with me in the way she shared most things, with enthusiasm and a specific figure already attached, $60,000. I looked at the number. I thought about it for 2 days. Then I said yes, because Marcus had worked hard, because Diane wanted it, and because I had spent 11 years believing that at some point the ledger would balance in ways that weren't financial. I hired the event coordinator. I managed the vendor contracts. I dealt with the florist when she tried to substitute a cheaper centerpiece arrangement without notifying anyone. I drove 40 minutes to taste test the menu, because Diane had a conflict that day and Marcus was busy and someone needed to do it. I did not expect a monument. I expected, at minimum, to exist. The evening started well enough. The room looked beautiful, and I felt the particular quiet satisfaction of a project completed correctly. Guests arrived. There was cocktail hour. I moved through the crowd the way I usually do, making conversation where it was invited, leaving space where it wasn't. Marcus arrived with his girlfriend Claire and a group of his residency colleagues, all of them young and loud in the way that exhausted people are loud when they finally have a reason to celebrate. He looked good. I was glad for him genuinely. Whatever complicated feelings I carried about our relationship, I never wanted him to fail. He saw me across the room and gave me a nod. That was the entirety of our interaction before dinner began. We were seated. The first course arrived. There were toasts. Diane's sister went first, then a friend of Marcus's from college, then one of his professors who had flown in from Philadelphia. They were all warm and appropriate, and slightly too long the way toasts always are. Then Marcus stood. He had prepared something. You could tell. There was a folded piece of paper in his hand that he didn't end up using, which meant he had prepared it, and then decided to speak from whatever was in his chest instead. Sometimes that produces the best speeches. Sometimes it produces the best speeches. Sometimes it produces something else entirely. He thanked his professors. He thanked his colleagues. He thanked Diane at length, beautifully, and she cried the way mothers cry at these things, with complete permission and no apology. He thanked his grandfather, who was not present but whose memory he carried. He thanked Claire, who blushed and covered her face with her napkin. And then he said, and I'm going to be precise about this because precision matters, and of course to everyone who made tonight possible, the venue, the food, all of it, we know who really put this together. He paused. He smiled. Mom always comes through. The room applauded. Diane smiled and dabbed her eyes again. I sat with my hands on the table, and I said nothing. It was not the omission itself that landed hardest. It was the particular shape of the replacement. Not I forgot Gerald. Not even silence, which I could have absorbed. It was the active redirection. The deliberate pointing. Mom always comes through. With 200 people watching and applauding and nodding, and me sitting 8 feet away having personally negotiated the overtime rate for the parking attendants that morning. I am 63 years old. I have swallowed things quietly my entire life because I believed that patience was a form of strength. I believed that character was demonstrated over time, not announced in moments. I believed that the people who mattered would eventually see what was in front of them. I have been wrong before. I picked up my water glass. I set it down. I looked at the centerpiece, the right centerpiece, the one I had defended. And I thought about what I was going to do next. The answer came from an unexpected direction. Claire stood up. She was still holding her napkin. She looked at Marcus with an expression I couldn't fully read from across the table, part confusion, part something harder. Then she looked out at the room. I'm sorry, she said, and her voice was quiet, but the room had good acoustics. People turned. I want to add something, if that's okay. Marcus looked at her with the expression of a man who had not expected this addition to the evening's program. I've been with Marcus for 3 years, Claire said, and in that time I've had a lot of conversations with Gerald. She looked at me. I know who called the venue. I know who dealt with the florist situation last month. I know whose name is on every single vendor contract for tonight. Because Marcus asked me to help him review the files 2 weeks ago when he thought she paused, chose her words, when he thought he might want to make some changes to the arrangements. The room was very quiet. I just think, Claire said carefully, that the people who build the foundation deserve to be standing on it. She sat down. Marcus said her name low, and she looked at him pleasantly and did not respond. I became aware that people were looking at me. Not all at once, but in the spreading, rippling way that attention moves through a crowd when something has shifted and everyone is recalibrating. I saw Diane's face. She had stopped smiling. Her expression was the one I had seen before, the one that meant she was doing that particular kind of knowing, putting information somewhere she would not have to look at directly. I stood up. I want to be clear that I had not planned this. I am not a man who prepares speeches, and I do not enjoy being looked at by rooms full of people. But I stood up because something in me had decided, somewhere between the moment Marcus redirected that applause and the moment Claire finished speaking, that I was done being located in corners. I did not raise my voice. "Marcus," I said, "congratulations. You worked hard and you earned those letters after your name. That's real, and nothing about tonight changes it." He was watching me with an expression I had never seen on him before. "I think it might have been uncertainty. I've been part of this family for 11 years, I said. I have tried in that time to be useful, to show up when things were needed. I wasn't always asked. Sometimes I wasn't thanked. I made peace with that because I thought that's what you do for the people you love." I looked at Diane. She was looking at the table. "Tonight cost $60,000, I said. "I have the contracts if anyone would like to review them. I'm not saying that to make anyone feel small. I'm saying it because I'd like, one time, for the accounting to be accurate." I picked up my water glass. "To Marcus," I said. "To your future patients. To the doctor you're going to be." I drank. I set the glass down. I sat back in my chair. Nobody applauded. But nobody looked away either. The dinner continued. The food was served. And it was good. It was exactly what I had approved, and under different circumstances I would have felt straightforward satisfaction at that. The string quartet played through their approved playlist. The dessert course arrived on schedule. Marcus did not speak to me for the first hour after my remarks. I did not seek him out. I ate my dinner, and I talked with a retired architect at my table who had worked on a bridge project in Oregon that I had read about, and it was one of the better conversations I had had in months. Diane came to find me during the transition between dessert and dancing. "Gerald," she said. "Diane, you embarrassed him." I looked at her for a moment. She is still a beautiful woman. She still has that laugh, somewhere in her, though I have not heard it directed at me in a long time. "He omitted me," I said, "in front of 200 people, after 11 years. He didn't mean, he meant exactly what he said. That's not an accusation. That's just an honest reading of what happened." She was quiet. "I am not angry," I said, and this was true. "I am tired. There's a difference." I excused myself and stepped outside. The parking attendants, whose overtime I had negotiated, nodded at me as I passed. I stood in the evening air for a while and thought about what my life looked like from a sufficient distance. Marcus found me there about 20 minutes later. He didn't say anything at first. He stood beside me and looked at the parking lot, and I let him do that because I have never believed in forcing a conversation before someone is ready to have it. "Claire is upset with me," he said finally. "That seems like something to address with Claire." Another silence. "The contracts," he said. "Were they really all yours?" "Everyone." He breathed out slowly. "I knew you helped. I think I let it stay vague in my head because it was easier." "I know," I said. "I've known that for a while." "That's not an excuse." "No," I agreed. "It's not." He turned to look at me then, and I saw something in his face that I had been waiting 11 years to see. Not gratitude exactly, and not guilt either. Something more honest than either of those. Something that looked like he was finally seeing what was actually in front of him. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "I don't know how to. I grew up in a house where you were there, but you weren't my dad, and I never figured out what that was supposed to look like." "Neither did I said. "I want you to know that. I made it up as I went along, same as you." He nodded slowly. "I don't need an apology tonight," I said. "I don't need anything from you tonight, but I'd like, going forward, for us to be honest about what this has been, what I've put into it, what that cost me, and what I'd like in return, which is not money and not a speech, just accuracy." He seemed to be absorbing this. "What does that look like?" he asked. "It looks like what Claire did tonight," I said. "Someone in the room who knows the truth and is willing to say it out loud." He was quiet for a while after that. "She's something," he said finally, and there was something softer in his voice. "She is," I said. "You should tell her that." He went back inside. I stayed outside a little longer. The night was clear. I could hear the music shifting to something with more tempo and the sound of the crowd moving into it. 200 people celebrating a real achievement in a room that was beautiful, with food that was good, with flowers that were the right flowers. I had done that, not alone. Nothing is done alone. But I had carried more of it than anyone had said out loud tonight. And now someone had said it out loud. Not me. Someone who saw it clearly from the outside and decided that accuracy mattered more than comfort. I thought about the next 11 years and what I wanted them to look like. I thought about what I had said to Diane. I am tired. And what that tiredness actually meant. It was not the tiredness of someone who wants to stop. It was the tiredness of someone who has been carrying something one-handed when it was designed for two. I went back inside. I sat back down. The architect from Oregon was still at the table, and he had found a pen and was sketching something on a cocktail napkin. And we talked for another hour about load distribution and what makes a structure last. At the end of the evening, as guests were collecting their coats, Claire approached me. She was carrying her small purse, and her expression had settled into something clear and resolved. "I hope that wasn't out of line," she said. "It was exactly in line," I told her. "I've been waiting for someone to draw that line for a long time." She smiled. "He's a good person. He just has some habits that need adjusting. Most people do." "Are you going to be okay?" she asked. Not in the way people ask when they want reassurance. In the way people ask when they actually want the answer. I thought about the question. "I'll be better," I said. Tonight was the first night in a long time where the accounting was accurate. That matters to me more than whether or not everyone was comfortable. She nodded like she understood that completely. Marcus drove her home. On his way out, he stopped by my chair and put his hand briefly on my shoulder. Didn't say anything, just that contact, just that acknowledgement. And then he was gone. Diane and I drove home mostly in silence. It was not an angry silence. It was the kind of silence that has too much in it to address in a single car ride. The kind that is going to require a longer conversation, maybe several, maybe the longest ones we've ever had. I don't know what those conversations are going to produce. I have made my peace with not knowing. What I know is this. I am 63 years old. I built things for a living for most of my adult life. Structures designed to hold weight, designed to last, designed to do their job without announcing themselves. I brought that same approach to my family, and for a long time I believed the approach was correct. I still believe in quiet strength. I still believe in quiet strength. I still believe that character is demonstrated over time. But I have also learned, later than I should have, that a structure cannot stand forever on a foundation that nobody acknowledges. At some point, the foundation has to be named. At some point, the engineer has to step forward and say, "I designed this, I built this, this is what it cost, and this is what it's worth, and I am still here. I'm still here." That felt like enough, driving home through the dark, past the kind of bridges I used to build. Sturdy and unremarkable and exactly as strong as they needed to be. It felt, for the first time in a long time, like enough.